Her Mother's Curse Part 5, #Tales, #afrotale, #dark folklore, #whispers in the shadows. Once upon a time, in a quiet village surrounded by whispering trees, there lived a young girl named Nighy. She was the youngest of 3 daughters, but by far the most beautiful. Her eyes sparkled like the river after rain, and her skin glowed like sunlight on golden clay. But beauty in Nighy's house was dangerous. Her mother, Mama Yale, was a bitter woman twisted by envy and pain. She had once been the fairest in the land, but time and betrayal had hardened her, and when she saw the village boys whispering and laughing every time Nighy passed, her heart grew cold. Unlike most mothers, Mama Yale did not want her daughter to marry well. She wanted Nighy to remain invisible because she feared Nighy's beauty would draw love, attention, and freedom, the very things she had been denied. So one night, under the shadow of the moon, she did the unthinkable. As Nighy slept peacefully on her mat, dreaming of music and mangoes, Mama Yale heated a pot of water until it bubbled like rage. Then, with trembling hands and a face devoid of mercy, she poured it onto Nighy's delicate skin. The screams echoed through the village. By morning, Nighy's face was scarred, her smooth skin blistered, her once radiant eyes swollen. Her sisters stood in horror, but said nothing. Mama Yale only muttered, "Now no man will choose her over you." And for years, no man did. The village forgot Nighy's laughter. Children whispered tales of the burned girl in the hut, but in a ... she did not break. She hid her face in cloth, but her spirit, her light never faded. She began to sing, not for love, but for healing. Her voice, raw and haunting, through trees and dreams. And soon, far away in the forested highlands, a blind prince heard her song and followed the sound. To be continued. Her Mother's Curse, Part 6, #Tales, #afrotale, #resilience, #love beyond looks. The blind prince's name was Oba, young man born into wealth, but not into peace. After an illness took his sight in childhood, his world became sound, scent, and soul. His people called him weak, but his heart held strength beyond what eyes could see. One night, as the wind danced through the hills, he heard a song that touched something ancient inside him. It was not just melody, it was mourning, a cry wrapped in honey and sorrow. It came from far across the valleys, but to him it felt as if the singer stood beside him, whispering to his soul. He sent word to his attendants, "I must find the one who sings in shadows. I must know her pain." They warned him, "That song belongs to the burned girl, cursed, feared. No man dares speak to her, let alone marry her." But Prince Oba only smiled and said, "Then no man has listened with the right ears." And so, with his cane of carved ebony, he walked through rivers, through fields, through markets where even goats stopped to hear him pass. He followed the song each evening as it floated through the dusk, until one twilight he stood before a small hut. Inside, Nighy sang to herself as she ground herbs. Her face still carried the deep scars of betrayal, but her spirit had become something unbreakable, like the earth after fire. When she turned and saw the blind prince at her door, she froze. No man had ever come for her. He did not flinch at her face. He did not ask why she wore no veil. He simply said, I have heard your soul in your song, and it is the most beautiful thing I've ever known. Will you sing it beside me every day? Tears filled Nighy's eyes, not of sadness, but of something she had long buried, hope. Her Mother's Curse, Part 7, #Tales, #afrotale, #forgiveness and fire, #beauty within an AYA, stood frozen at the doorway. The blind Prince Abba waited with a calm that felt like rain after years of drought. No man had ever looked at her without pity. No man had ever listened to her without judgment. And yet here he stood, not seeing her scars, but feeling her soul. She whispered, You do not even know my name. I do, he said gently. You are the one who turned pain into a song. You are the one whose voice led me through darkness. Nighy's heart pounded. Could this be real? Could love find her even after her own mother had tried to erase her? But her joy was clouded by doubt. My mother poured boiling water on me because she couldn't bear my beauty, she said, voice shaking. Now I am no longer beautiful. I am ruined. Oba stepped closer. Beauty fades. Scars fade. But what's inside you never fades. And what I see inside you is the fire of the sun, the strength of mountains. That's what I want beside me. Nighy had not cried in years, but tonight tears flowed freely, not from pain, but release. Still, she knew the path ahead would not be easy. The village feared her. Her mother still lived in that same house, pretending to be holy. Her sisters remained silent, pretending nothing happened. But Nighy had changed. That night, she took Prince Abba to the old mango tree, the only place she had ever known peace. There, she sang her truth, a song of scars and survival, of fire and betrayal, of healing and new beginnings. And the trees listened, and the earth sighed. And somewhere in the shadows, Mama Elia, her mother, heard that song and trembled. Because it was not a cry anymore. It was a call. Her Mother's Curse, Part 8, #Tales, #afrotale, #confrontation, #truth rising at sunrise. The village awoke to whispers. The blind prince visited her. The girl with the burned face. Is he cursed too? But Oba was no ordinary prince. And Nighy was no longer the girl who cried behind veils. That morning, they walked hand in hand through the village square. People paused. Mouths opened. Some turned away in shame. Others watched in awe. Nighy wore no veil. Her scars shimmered under the light knots. Ugly, but powerful, like a warrior's mark. Then, without hesitation, they turned down the narrow path to Mama Elira's hut. The old woman sat in her doorway, peeding Ketsaba. When she saw Nighy approaching, something shifted in her eyes. Fear, yes, but also the weight of guilt. Nighy stopped a few feet away. She looked at her mother not with hate, not with weakness, but with a stillness that came from deep within. You tried to destroy me, Nighy said, her voice steady like a drumbeat. You burned me to keep me small, to make me invisible. Mama Elira looked down. I was afraid, she whispered, afraid they would love you and forget me. I gave everything to this house. To you girls. And I was forgotten. Na yakuneru to beside her. I carried your pain. I wore it like a mask, but it was never mine to carry. Oba stepped forward. Your daughter has become more than beauty. She is voice. She is fire. She is freedom. And then something happened that no one expected. Mama Iliara began to cry. Not the crocodile tears of old. Jealousy, but real tears. Cracks forming in the wall she had built for decades. I thought I was saving you from pain, but I passed mine on to you. I'm sorry, Naya placed a small cloth in her mother's hand, not to wipe away guilt, but to begin. That day, the villager saw something ancient and new. Not a prince choosing a princess, but a scarred girl choosing her power, her peace, and even perhaps forgiveness. But the tale isn't done yet, for the fire that healed not was only the beginning. Her Mother's Curse Part 9, #Tales, #afrotale, #becoming queen, #the girl with fire in her veins. The village was never the same after that day. Children no longer ran from Naya's face. They sat near her feet to hear her sing. Women who once whispered behind her back now asked for her herbs and healing, and men who had mocked her beauty now spoke her name with respect. But Naya had never wanted to be worshipped. She had only ever wanted peace. And still, Uba stood beside her not as a savior, but as a witness. Come with me, he said one evening. My people must know your fire too. So Naya left the village not in shame, as she once feared, but in honor. She walked beside Prince Uba, not behind him, across golden fields, through river roads, and into the hills of the blind. King's court, there, nobles murmured. Is this the girl with the burned face? She's not beautiful. She cannot be queen, but the king, old and wise, sat forward on his throne and said, let me hear her speak. And Naya did. She spoke of pain and healing, of mothers who bleed onto their daughters, of women taught to hate themselves, of voices buried in silence, and how she dug hers out from fire and ash. When she finished, the king was quiet for a long time. Then he stood and bowed not to a princess, but to a woman who had earned her crown through scars, not gold. I see clearly, though my son does not, the king said. She will not only be queen, she will be legend. And so it was Oba and Naya were married under a sky lit with lanterns, but there was no royal robe for Naya. She wore a simple dress, her face uncovered, her head held high. And in that moment, every girl who had ever been silenced, scarred, or shamed, saw herself in the queen who rose from flame. But still, a shadow lingered in the mountains, a whisper in the wind. For every queen must face not only the fire of her past, but the darkness yet to come. Her Mother's Curse Part 10, #Tales, #afrotale, #queen in the storm, #the witch of the hills moonlight, bathed the kingdom in silver on the night of their wedding. Drums echoed from the valleys, songs soared like birds. And for the first time in many seasons, the people believed in more than golden blood, they believed in hope. Queen Naya stood on the palace balcony, the wind lifting her veil of fire-colored silk. She had been crowned with no diamonds, only a band of woven vine symbol of growth and strength. But while the people danced and the prince rested, Nighy couldn't sleep. Something stirred. And that night it came. A raven jet black, with eyes like burning coals, landed at the edge of her window. In its beak, it carried a leaf that crumbled to ash as it fell. Nighy stepped back. Her voice caught in her throat. Her mother's curse, part 11, #Tales, #afrotale, #test of love, #when he stopped listening, the warning from Mama Shanitha, witch of the hills, clung to Nighy like smoke. This fire will burn your heart. Days passed, then weeks. Nighy took her place as queen, not in silks or gold, but in action. She walked among the sick. She rebuilt the broken wells. She sat with widows and orphans, listening to stories no one else had time for. And at first, Oba was proud. He called her his lioness, his light in darkness. But something shifted. He stopped attending meetings. He slept later. He no longer asked how her day went. And when she sang the very songs that once led him through valleys, he listened with empty ears. Nighy tried to reach him. Oba, are you tired? Oba, speak to me. Oba, am I still your queen? But he only offered a soft smile. The kind people when they're no longer truly there. One night, after a gathering of chiefs, Nighy stood on the balcony alone. The stars above looked like they were falling, and then she heard it. Whispers not from the sky, but from the palace walls. She was burned for a reason. A scarred queen brings scarred luck. The prince has begun seeing the healer's daughter. Nighy turned sharply, but no one was there. Were they lies? Were they spells? Or was the kingdom already slipping through her fingers? She stormed to Oba's chamber. He sat alone, blind eyes, facing the empty fireplace. Tell me the truth, Oba. Have you turned your face from me? He didn't answer. Only silence. Silence sharp enough to break her. Finally, he said, almost whispering, you were once mine, but now you belong to everyone. And that, more than anything, shattered her heart. That night, Queen Nighy sat in her chamber. Not as a queen, not as a survivor, but as a woman, left in silence by the very man who once followed her voice through the dark. But the fire inside her didn't die, it flared. Because if love could fall asleep, then she would awaken it or bury it. Her mother's curse, part 12, #Tales, #afrotale, #the fire within, #when a queen walks alone. The moon was high when Queen Nighy left the palace. No guards, no crown, no footsteps but her own. She wrapped herself in a plain shawl, the color of ashes, and walked beyond the gates where no queen was supposed to go. Because something inside her had broken, and something else, something deeper had woken up. She remembered what Mama Shani had said. The world does not like women who rise from ashes. Maybe the world didn't like them, but Nighy had no intention of asking the world for permission anymore. She followed the river path into the hills, past sleeping goats and thorny trees that whispered old secret. And there, in the place where earth meets sky, she found the twisted baobab tree that marked the edge of the forbidden forest. There, Mama Shani was waiting. You came, said the old witch. Her voice sounded like wind through dry bones. "I came," Nighy replied, her voice steady. "My husband has forgotten me. The people whisper behind my back. I am queen in name, but alone in truth." Mama Shani smiled, teeth glinting like obsidian. "Then you are ready." "Ready for what?" The witch pointed to a hollow in the earth, glowing faintly red. "To step beyond love, beyond pain, beyond even being chosen." She handed Nighy a black clay bowl filled with ash drink. "Not to forget, not to forgive, but to remember who you were before anyone told you who to be." Nighy lifted the bowl to her lips. The ash tasted like burnt honey and river smoke. It sank deep into her bones, and suddenly she was inside memory, not her own but her mother's. She saw Mama Elira as a young girl, beautiful and full of light. She saw how the village men used her, how the women envied her, how her own dreams were stripped from her like bark from a tree. She saw the curse, not as hatred, but as a poisoned gift. Then she saw Abez a child, sitting alone while the other princes trained, blind, mocked, rejected by his own brothers. And she saw how her voice had become his anchor, and how power had made him forget his anchor. When Nighy opened her eyes, it was morning. The wind was calm. Mama Shani was gone, but something had changed. She had gone to find answers. She had found herself, her mother's curse, part 13, #Taylees, #afrotale, #return of the scarred queen, #crown of her own when Queen Nighy returned. The palace guards barely recognized her. She wore no gold, no jewels, only a shawl of black earth and red thread colors of burial and rebirth. Her hair flowed wild, her eyes sharp as obsidian. Her silence louder than any war drum. The ministers stared. The court fell quiet. Even Oba paused mid-sentence when he heard her footsteps. Nighy didn't wait for permission. She stepped straight into the throne hall. The elders rose. The room held its breath. She looked not at her husband, but at the council, at the chiefs, at the women seated far in the back. And she spoke. "I was chosen once. Then I was ignored. Then I was forgotten. But now I choose myself." Murmurs rippled across the marble. "I was crowned queen by tradition, but today I crowned myself by truth. Not as wife, not as daughter, but as a woman who walked through fire." Kept walking. Oba stood slowly. His voice was soft. "Nighy, I never meant to," but she lifted her hand. He stopped. "I don't hate you, Uba, but I will not shrink to be loved. You followed my song once. Now I follow my own." Then she turned not away from the throne, but toward Eten sat not beside him. On it, alone, whole. The ministers exchanged glances. No law said she couldn't rule alone, and no one, not one soul dared challenge her now. The queen, who had once been burned to silence, had returned not just with her voice, but with a new law. Her mother's curse, part 14. Hashtag Tailies, hashtag afrotale, hashtag the queen and the unseen, hashtag legacy of flame queen, ruled with the strength of memory and the clarity of pain. She did not build taller walls. She opened the gates. She did not wear Gulchi warcloth dyed with the earth. She sat not above her people but among them, listening, always listening. And because she had known betrayal, she trusted carefully. Because she had walked through fire, she ruled with compassion and steel. But the world beyond her kingdom was watching, and it did not like what it saw. One morning, a messenger arrived from the kingdom of Kundu, a land ruled by proud warriors and ancient kings. He rode a red horse, its hooves wrapped in silence. He bowed, low and sharp, and delivered a letter sealed with black wax. To the queen who rules alone. Power is not meant for scarred women. Step down, or we will come. And when we come, we will not ask twice. King Barrage of Kundu, asterisk, the court held its breath. The ministers looked at Nighy with fear. Even Obanau, a shadow beside the throne, sat upright. But Nighy did not flinch. She rose, walked to the center of the hall, and read the letter again, this time aloud. Every word, every insult, every warning. Then she took the scroll and burned it with a candle flame. The ash drifted to the floor like feathers. And she said, "Tell King Barrage this. The last man who tried to silence me poured fire on my face. But I survived. So let him come and see what a woman forged by flame can do." Cheers rose from the back of the hall, from the women, the elders, the forgotten. For Nighy had not only become queen, her mother's curse part 15, hashtag Tailies, hashtag afrotale, hashtag the fire spreads, hashtag rise of the queen's word of Nighy's defiance spread like wildfire. In the marketplace of Kundu. Women whispered, "She burned the letter. She rules alone." In the desert cities, little girls began to tie red cloth around their arms. In fishing villages, mothers told their daughters the story of the scarred queen who sat on a throne and did not flinch. But King Barrage he was not amused. He was a man raised in a palace built by blood, a king who believed that power came only from fire and that women were made to kneel beside it. So he sent not a second letter, but an army. 500 warriors marched toward Nighy's kingdom. They wore bronze masks. They carried shields shaped like wolves. Behind them trailed a cruel windand. Something else. Something not. Human Nighy stood upon the outer wall when the scouts returned. "They come," said the captain. "With fire and teeth?" She nodded once, then turned to the council and said, "We do not run, we do not beg, and we do not bow." But she also knew this war could not be fought with blades alone. So that night, she climbed the cliffs of Whispering Stone and lit a single torch in the dark. It was a signal, a call sent not to soldiers, but two queens who had never been crowned. From the south came Queen Aisha, a warrior who led a nation of weavers and storm. From the islands came Ima of the tides, burned once for loving another woman, now ruler of the sea winds. From the far forests came Old Mother Zu, whose age had made her invisible to Kingsbutt, not to magic. They came quietly, without trumpets, dressed in the skins of the lives they had survived, and together they sat with nighy beneath the stars. Will you fight with me? Nighy asked, Dot old mother? Zula laughed. Child, we have waited our whole lives for a woman to say those words. And so, before the war began, something greater rose. Her mother's curse, part 15, hashtag Tailies, hashtag afrotale, hashtag the fire spreads, hashtag rise of the silent queen's word. Of Nighy's defiance spread like wildfire. In the marketplace of Kundu, women whispered, she burned the letter. She rules alone. In the desert cities, little girls began to tie red cloth around their arms. In fishing villages, mothers told their daughters the story of the scarred queen who sat on a throne and did not flinch. But King Barrage of Kundu, he was not amused. He was a man raised in a palace built by blood. A king who believed that power came only from fear and that women were made to kneel beside it. So he sent not a second letter, but an army. 500 warriors marched toward Nighy's kingdom. They wore bronze masks. They carried